And we are very happy to be joined as we continue the show here by Tara Houska, who is a leader in the Indigenous-led resistance against the Line 3 pipeline. Tara, thank you so much for being with us.
Afternoon, I guess, to you both.
Right on. Well, thanks so much for joining us again. And, I think maybe just for those who don't know, could you just give us a brief primer on what the Line 3 pipeline is and why people are opposed to it?
Yeah, is the dirtiest fossil fuel in the world, coming out of Alberta, Canada, passing through many, many Indigenous nations along its route. And the portion that's been fought so fiercely has been a section here in what's now Minnesota by the many nations along its route here. We are fighting because it is a threat to our way of life. It passes through our treaty territories in Anishinaabe, King, and the headwaters of the Mississippi River. It terminates at the shore of Lake Superior, passes through over 200 bodies of water, 800 wetlands. 85% of the water in the United States, or in what's now the United States, begins here in Minnesota. That's the amount of water that this would impact if there was a critical spill. Enbridge is responsible for the largest spill in U.S. history, and the largest inland spill, and the second largest inland spill in U.S. history. So they're not a company that has behaved well over time.
Wow. And what has been the response of, the company, their security guards, local police, to the level of this resistance in terms of the repression they've been putting on the work of those who have been fighting back?
Yeah, I'm actually just coming to you from a direct action that occurred this morning. There is a blockade of water protectors suspended from an aerial blockade over at a pump station, a place that electrifies the pipeline. Tar sands is actually a sludge, and so it requires an enormous amount of electricity to actually send it through the pipe. Police were using pain compliance on people this morning, so zip tying them while they were suspended in the air, jerking on their bodies. The two people that were inside actually almost fell to the ground. Ripped them out while we were screaming at the top. That's one instance. They dislocated someone's jaw a couple weeks ago. Jesus. They've been using rubber bullets, mace, you name it. It's been deployed out here in northern Minnesota. I was hit with rubber bullets a couple weeks ago and maced and all those things. And these guys are billing to enbridge at the end of the day too. So every time they are out protecting the pipeline, they get to turn around and bill back to a escrow account that's run by the state but funded by enbridge. They've billed over $2 million. Police have to this private industry at this point.
Wow, that's okay, man. Well, I think that sadly, the level of repression, I think, on water protectors and others is, maybe some of the most significant in the country. But, I also wanted to ask you, and I think this is a crucially important element of this. I mean, I think people, when they think of pipeline resistance, they pretty much only think of climate change. But I mean, this really is also a major issue in terms of the sovereignty of Indigenous peoples, it seems, as well. And I was hoping you could talk about that.
Yeah, we are obviously engaged in the fight against climate crisis. The existential threat that is all around us in every part of the world at this point, including North America, finally. We've been fighting a tar sands pipeline under smoky skies. The forests above us have been burning. The forests to the west of us have been burning. And to the east of us, there's these major floods that have been occurring all summer long. As we're in a record drought in northern Minnesota, the rivers are empty, and enbridge has been draining 5 billion gallons of water out of the rivers to build its tar sands pipeline. We know all of that, yet there's also these pieces of what Indigenous people around the globe are really trying to say, which is we're the people that are still connected to the land. We're the people 80% of its biodiversity globally. We're 5% of the population holding 80% of the biodiversity. That's not by accident. It's not by happenstance. It's because we never lost those connections. We never lost that understanding that the earth is our relative. It's not a resource. And when it comes to something like this, it's just colonization in a new form. and a new face. And it's a continuation of extraction from our people and coming for these last beautiful places that we hold, coming for the last bits of life that are left on this earth that can sustain us, that are still habitable. That's what we're fighting for, and that's what we're trying to stand up for. And it's pretty pretty appalling to see President Biden centering himself as this climate president, as a defender of Indigenous sovereignty, as a respecter of tribal nations, when there are 3 tribal nations that have been suing against this project since the beginning. There have been hundreds and hundreds of people arrested in this struggle. I think a lot of folks are familiar with the fight over at Standing Rock and the Dakota Access Pipeline. There were 800 people arrested in that fight. I was one of them. There have been close to 800 arrested in this fight during the pandemic. We have continued on understanding that they are not listening to legislation, to regulation, to political pressure, but they do listen to our bodies being on the line. So that's what we've been doing all these years and months.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any political support on this? The squad type, the squad members, I guess, come to mind. Has there been an attempt to reach out to them, and have they taken a stance on this?
Yeah, the progressives have been supportive. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who's from Minnesota, has actually been in this camp. Was out here when it was still cold out, standing a couple feet from where I am right now. So there has been support. And presidential candidate Bernie Sanders took a stance against it in 2016 again when he ran in 2020. Or sorry, 2020.
Mm-hmm,
Man, it's hard to keep track of what time we're even in. It just keeps going and going.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been support. I think that what's happening is there is so much happening in the world, and there's so much ugliness and so much disrespect of human life, as some enjoy comforts at the expense of others, and some enjoy human rights at the expense and knowing of others not receiving those same basic human rights. And there's so much going on that it's hard to break through into that national sphere. I mean, we've gained the support. It's just it's not been reflected in the political system that decides.
Mm-hmm. And for people who are watching, who maybe are just learning about this or just hearing about this, I mean, what kind of support do you need? Can people offer, and how should they go about it?
So we're nearing the end of construction. We are continuing to resist, obviously, as I just came from something this morning, and there was another blockade actually earlier this week that was led by Indigenous femmes and Two-Spirit folks. Successfully blockaded a man camp for 12 hours. That was pretty gnarly to see and pretty inspiring, especially given that Enbridge, the company behind this pipeline project, has already been busted a couple different times in sex trafficking rings. When these projects come, they also bring lots and lots of workers with them from other places. And there's harm borne by our people in real time. Besides the environmental harms and degradation, there's also the real cost of violence and sexual violence increasing in our communities. So I think, the hope is that, one, we can keep bailing people out of jail. I encourage people to check out stopline3bailfunds.org. The bail has been insane. The state is definitely using that tactic to try to drain us of resources. We're talking like 10, 20,000 per person.
Ooh.
Sometimes bail is in the network of like $100,000, $200,000 for just a couple of people getting out of jail. The level of repression has been very significant also. So the legal fees part of it is really important. We're telling people to call on Biden. We're telling people to push on Gina McCarthy. We're telling people to use whatever platforms and connections they have to reach out to these decision makers. But I think there's also a sense, at least from our collective, for people to find their bravery and to recognize what's really happening, and to have that agency, because we are people who have been almost genocided out of existence, and we need people to stand with us. And we're the ones that are carrying a lot of these fights around the globe when it comes to protection of the land. And I have the privilege to be in North America, where we're not openly assassinated for this work, but in other places around the globe, that is not the case. They're openly killed for trying to defend their own land. And so that ability and bravery of bringing your body and your freedom and your privilege to frontline struggle is really needed. Yeah, the petitions aren't working.
No, I hear you 100%. I mean, I think that if there's ever a moment for, escalation in that sense, this is certainly that moment, given everything, that we've seen in the seriousness. Well, Tara, I know you have a lot going on, but before I let you go, just any final words you want to say to our listeners?
There is a lot happening in the world, and it can be overwhelming, and it can lead to of disconnection, I think, and how do I process all of this? How do I find empathy and still remain myself and still be okay knowing that there's so much atrocity happening? There is so much beauty too. And there's beauty in, I guarantee, like the mutual aid circles that are forming in Afghanistan and other places. The beautiful solidarity between land defenders, the beautiful solidarity with folks that are leading struggles against police brutality and systemic racism and all these issues and societal ills that are everywhere. Workers' rights, like that was what was happening before this, right? Like that was the segment before this. I think when people come into these places and spaces, they find that love and that connection that so many of us have, I think, had pushed away from us through society as it exists now, which is extractivism. So find your way to frontline struggle, and find your bravery and find your heart and stand up for what's true.
Right on. Tara Houska, really appreciate you giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
All right. Thank you much. Keep going, man.
Right on.